Hi, boys and girls. Happy week 4 of online learning. Whoever would have thought we would be here right now, where I haven't seen you in over a month and we resulted to learning through our computers. But this is what it is. We are going to make the best of it. I am making this video to review some general things with you about Google Classroom, learning online, as well as to review Chapter 12. The content in Chapter 12, and I'm going to ask you a question a little bit later in this video, so just wait for it, that you will have to answer through Google Classroom to get credit. So one thing I want to remind all of you of is to make sure you are first looking, before you click on classwork at the top, make sure you click on stream. This is helpful because it tells you what is coming up for this week, okay? It also shows you current announcements I made. So here's today's announcement. I'm going to go through that with you. So here are past announcements. Make sure you have read these at least once, if not twice or 3 times, so that you know what's going on in my class. So here's last week's assignment. So I can scroll all the way down to the beginning. Okay. So here is week 1. All right. So these are going to stay here. Feel free to look back to these. So let's look at today's post. So you can read this to yourself, but I will kind of showcase the most important parts of this. So since we're at week 4 here, I haven't heard from you guys in a long time, and I know there's probably a lot of questions all of you have. What I decided to do is schedule a time this week where we can video chat with each other. The whole class can be involved in this, and we can talk to one another. You can ask me questions. This will be informal, meaning that I'm not going to be teaching anything new, and I say all of this in the post. I'm not teaching anything new. I can answer your questions. I can review some topics for you because you will have to take a test this week on Wednesday. But the purpose is just to check in with everybody. You can even talk about what you've been doing over this quarantine time. It doesn't necessarily even have to be about school or science, but I just really want to hear from you guys and answer any questions you have. Make sure you know when this is going to occur. So right now I have period 7 up. So if I look over here, this is period 7. So if you're in period 7, your meeting will take place this Friday at 11. Okay. And again, this is optional. But I would really like everyone to check in at some point. I will be on my computer and ready to have a meeting with you from our time that starts at 11. I will probably be on until 11:45. Depends how many questions you have and what we kind of talk about. But you don't have to show your video. I can just hear your voice. I don't think I may not even have my video up. But I just want you to be aware this is your opportunity now to, tell me any issues or problems you might have. If you don't want to do that in front of everybody because everyone will hear you, you can also send me an email, but I just figured this might, be a good opportunity for some of you who aren't comfortable with email to ask me questions in this way. So what you do is just click on the link and we can have our meeting. Okay, so this is the stream tab. Again, make sure you click on this before you click on the classwork tab. Okay, and there's the link here. So it's actually posted in 2 spots. So here's the link. Here's the link. So I'm going to click on classwork. My screen, again, looks a little bit different than yours since I have the teacher screen, but this is what we're going to do this week. For Monday, you're going to watch this video, and then you are going to answer the question. I can see who turned it in and who didn't. Tuesday, you have a quizzes to take. Nothing to submit, guys. I just want you to do the quizzes. Make sure you're getting 80%. Take it as many times as you need to get that 80. And then make sure you click mark as done. So there's no Word document to submit. You just mark it that you did it. So that's for you and for me. I will be looking at this, and I can see who turned it in and who didn't. So if I click on this, your name will appear. Wednesday is your test. So this is through Google Forms. And it is open notes. It is pass-fail. You need to get a 15 out of 22 to get a passing grade. If you get below a 15, you're going to have to take it again. You can take it as many times as you need. Just make sure you try to get all this done before Sunday at midnight. Thursday and Friday will be catch-up days. I didn't yet post this date yet. That means you need to go back to previous weeks and make sure that you handed everything in. So for instance, this was last week. Did you turn in your Adopt an Element project? It looks like all of you didn't. You should be able to see if you turned it in or you didn't. It should say turned in or missing. Okay. Sorry about this. I'm getting lots of emails. Okay, let's exit out of my email here. Just gonna do this. All right. So another thing you can do to keep track of the assignments you didn't do is to go into Sapphire. So our grading that we're doing for marking period 4, which we're currently in, all assignments will be a pass or a fail. So you're either going to see a 0, meaning you didn't do anything. You're going to see a C if you did the assignment and it's correct for the most part. If you see an I, that means you may have done the assignment incorrectly, although you submitted it and you have to redo it. Or you did the assignment poorly, it's not up to my standards, and you will have to redo it. So an I means you're going to have to redo it. Okay, so make sure that you are trying to get caught up as much as possible. This week is a smaller workload, so you really have only 3 things to do, and Thursday and Friday will be a catch-up day. Okay, so now we are going to go on to reviewing Chapter 12. Okay, and I wanted to review Chapter 12 because it's a little bit confusing, so I'm going to bring up a Word document here. So we talked about chemical, physical properties as well as chemical and physical changes. A property, boys and girls, it's just a quality, it's a characteristic about an object. So we have 2 different types of properties, chemical property, physical property. A chemical property, and boys and girls, you can pause the video here if you want to look at this in a little bit more detail. You can also use this page when you take your test on Wednesday through Google Forms. You may use this as a resource. So a chemical property is when we have to have a reaction. We have to make a reaction, chemical reaction happen to observe this. So for instance, if we want to see if something is flammable, like if we want to see if our kitchen curtains are flammable, we would have to get a match, get a lighter, and light it on fire. That means a chemical reaction is taking place. Anything that is on fire is a reaction. And we know that because we have some signs that we're going to talk about. So a chemical reaction also means a chemical change. Okay. Obviously, I would not suggest lighting your kitchen curtains on fire, but that's the example that came to my mind right now. Other chemical properties are toxicity, so how toxic something is. We would have to combine it with a substance to see if a chemical reaction happened, and that way it's a bit complicated, but we could see if a substance is toxic or not through a reaction. Another chemical property is pH. This is how acidic something is. So we would take this little piece of paper, we would dip it in the liquid. So let's say if we want to see if orange juice is acidic, which it is, orange juice is acidic. We would take something called litmus paper and we would dip it in the orange juice and it's going to change color. And I believe if we have red litmus paper and it changes to blue, it's acidic. So a chemical reaction happened, that color, that piece of paper changed color. So we have a color change, that means we have a chemical reaction. A physical property, boys and girls, we don't need a chemical reaction here. We can use our senses and observe something without a chemical reaction taking place. So we could feel something, we could determine the texture, if it's bumpy or smooth or sharp or glass-like. We could just run our finger across the surface. We're not creating a chemical reaction there, so it's a physical property. We could just look at the color of something. We can determine that salt is white. We can look at salt, we can see that it's white. We don't need a chemical reaction to know that. Okay, we can see the shape of something. We could determine the density. Okay? We could determine the volume by using a graduated cylinder. We could drop it in a cylinder with water, see how much the water goes up. We could determine the volume of something. Those types of things we don't need a chemical reaction for. So if you remember looking in the textbook, there's many more physical properties than chemical. Many more physical properties compared to chemical. So now we're going to go on to the two types of changes. A chemical change means a reaction. We talked about some signs even before we went to online learning, so here are the signs. Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's two. One example of a chemical reaction is anything that's exploding. So we have two signs here. We have production of light and heat, so the temperature increases. We could have a bike rusting, that's changing color. We could combine vinegar and baking soda, that would produce carbon dioxide, that's a gas. Okay. Don't forget formation of a precipitate. So it's not precipitation like weather, but it's when you have liquids that combine and they kind of clump together to form a solid. Might not be a solid like what you're thinking, but technically it's a solid. So lastly, a physical change involves no chemical reaction. It could be a change of texture, like you're sanding down a block of wood. You could be crushing a can, changing the shape of it. Now, obviously, sometimes you have both a chemical and physical change happen. So if you take a piece of paper, you light it on fire, it's going to change color and turn black. Chemical change. Well, it's also going to crumple up and form ash. So obviously, it's not going to be in the same shape as what it started in. So we're going to get a change of shape too. So yeah, a lot of times we have a chemical change. It changes physically too. Okay. But just remember, chemical change involves a reaction. One of the most confusing things is that color. Looking at the color of something is a physical property, but if something changes color, depending on the circumstance, it could be a chemical change. That's probably the most confusing one. So an example of a color change that indicates a chemical reaction is rust. That's a really good one. Remember from my post from baking cookies, if you mix what two colors make purple, blue and red. Blue and red make purple. So that, it's tricky. Not all circumstances that get a color change are chemical reactions. Same thing if you mix like Kool-Aid powder in a gallon of water. If you put a little bit of Kool-Aid powder in a gallon of water, it'll be a light red. So yeah, the water changed color. It was clear. Now it has a light red or pink color, but that doesn't mean a chemical reaction. So if you have a color change and it doesn't really make sense, probably a chemical reaction. So rust, burning something, white paper turns black. Anything that you burn will turn black. That is a color change. A chemical change, meaning a chemical reaction. Okay. So here's your question you have to answer through Google Classroom. I don't need that A there. What is one chemical change that results in a production of gas like carbon dioxide or any other gas? So here's your question. I would pause this now and make sure you answer through Google Classroom. Make sure you press submit over here. And you can use the internet to do so. That's what it says in the directions. One last thing, boys and girls, if you don't know how to email a teacher, you should know at this point, and make sure you're checking your email, have someone help you. But if you're not really comfortable emailing, to get a hold of me, this might even be easier, okay, is to go to, let's see if I can